Good morning, good afternoon, good evening
Good morning, everyone.
to everyone. How you doing, Osama?
Good.
All right,
So,
let's go through some announcements.
okay.
So first things first, this is ExMuslim Awareness Month, December. We're doing this weekly. We started on the first, what was it, Monday of this month. All 4 episodes are dedicated to ExMuslim Awareness Month. Endapostophobia is, or apostophobia, first of all, is like a concept that, well, actually, why don't you give a little bit of background, where that came from?
Right. So, the month of November is supposed to be Islamophobia Awareness Month. And obviously, if we were thinking about any kind of fear or any kind of irrational action towards a specific group of people, that's definitely something that needs to be rejected. And the impression that many people in the West get is that Islamophobia is directed against people, because it actually has some manifestations in the West that end up having that type of connotation and that type of baggage that comes with it. However, in order to actually talk about Islam in any kind of a rational way, be it by producing some rational criticism or just talking about it as an idea, we have to disentangle these two things. We're not talking about criticisms of the Muslims themselves, but the idea of Islam as it manifests itself in the lives of some subset of these people. And so apostophobia is a real thing, and it is directed against a group of people. So unlike the case of Islamophobia, where it has actual valid grounds for criticizing an idea, apart from the people who might hold this idea. When it comes to apostophobia, which is fear of apostates, that's actually a real thing that exists in Muslim societies, and that is directly targeting a subset of people who reject religion. It's not specifically talking about Islam as a religion that targets apostates, but of course, this is mainly an issue right now in Muslim societies, where apostasy is something that gets punished sometimes by the death penalty in certain Muslim societies. But other societies, also Muslim societies, can have other types of punishment, including social death, isolating people from their ability to interact with society as other human beings.
To give people more context, so this is the 3rd episode of this series. If you go, I think, to the 2nd episode, Sam and I talk about an example of apostophobia that I experienced, and that's in the U.S. And that's anyway. I don't want to get into that now. And more generally, anyone who's watching this, if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, a lot of what we say here is not going to make real good sense to you unless you watch the first 2 episodes. So maybe pause this. Maybe not now if you're watching it live, but if you're watching it later.
And I might add also, in addition to watching these episodes right now, because this is a month that is being marked by various groups and various activists. If you just search for the hashtag and apostophobia and looking at people who are saying things about that, you have a lot of different perspectives, different people from different places who have a lot to say about what's going on and why this is an important month that needs to be observed as a kind of a contrast to what the Islamophobia month is supposed to be presenting.
I'd like to say something. Humans came up with the idea of freedom of religion, And obviously that comes from an older thing, which is just freedom in general, freedom of thought, and then of course freedom of religion, which is to think about what you want about God and then also practice things with freedom. So some kind of traditions like having a tree in Christmas is a type of one of those, you know. You should have the freedom to do those things. And here's the thing. So we had freedom of religion as a concept that people would talk about for centuries, while still there's a fear of leaving your religion. That makes no goddamn sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it does make sense in the sense that, okay, we're slow to change, similar to, you know, I think this is everyone, but, you know, when I left Islam, that didn't mean that all of a sudden I fixed all the ideas in my head related to that. It still takes decades to fix those things in yourself. So I guess it makes sense that as a culture, we started with the concept of freedom of religion and that spread, but the fear of leaving your religion is slower to come along and be consistent with the idea. If there's freedom of religion, there should also be no fear of leaving your religion.
Yeah, and I would probably follow up on this by saying a couple of things about two different types of societies that we're considering here. We have, on the one hand, Western society that has a kind of a legal guarantee that's enshrined in law that tells you that you have the right to take up whatever religion you have. You have the right to leave a religion, join another religion, have no religion at all. And the contrast,
individual rights of individual people.
Yeah, well, human
protection
rights
from other people, protection from the government.
Yeah, and so I would say that these are human rights. They're not only individual rights. By contrast, you have other societies that not only consider this issue problematic, but it's also enshrined in law in the opposite way, by considering apostasy as a breaking of the law that warrants punishment and has all sorts of repercussions that exceed just someone changing their mind about a religion, or joining a different religion, or, like I said, having no religion at all. And so even if you look at a big society like the US, where religion is not something that the state is supposed to impose on anyone, the fact that there is that separation, we talked a bit about that by contrasting the US to Europe, for example, where in the US it's also possible to have a society where there are subgroups that practice their own religion, their own subculture that imposes this type of restriction, even though the outer society, the society at large, is actually not advocating this. It's just that they consider interfering in the happenings of societies, of little communities, as something that would be an interference by the state. And so you have this kind of tension between wanting to guarantee freedom of religion, and you also want to respect the specifics of that.
You know, I'm glad you brought this up, and you brought up the difference between UK and US. And ever since our last episode, I'm still talking to a lot of people on Reddit and YouTube, and I'm learning new things that I never thought of before, things about the UK that I didn't understand before, its history. And actually part of this discussion was from a chat with ChatGPT. What happened was somebody responded to me on Reddit saying, expressing that they weren't aware of what's happening in the UK, in how it's different in the US with respect to Muslims. And he's an American, I'm an American, and I'm talking about the UK. And what he said was, my right-wing radar is going off. And I said, well, it's doing a false positive here. Why don't you look it up yourself? And then I thought, instead of making him look it up himself, because if you just Google's hiding things, okay? So I thought, let me see what ChatGPT will say. So I start asking it questions, Man, it was obfuscating so much. And but it was delivering a lot of details I didn't know about, which was really useful information. And it was basically kind of saying, look, there really isn't freedom of religion in the UK the way there in Europe, the way there is in the US. And it's a freedom of speech issue connected to it. We in the US have a freedom of speech concept built into our law that maybe exists in some form, older version of it in Europe, but not to the level we have here. We have a lot more protections, from what I understand, from what ChatGPT told me. I don't know that much about it, you know.
I cannot really say much in terms of the laws. I mean, living in the U.S., I have a sense of what that means, and having lived in Arab Muslim countries, I also have the other way of thinking about this. But in a place like France, which does actually look up to the U.S. when it comes to having the two revolutions taken place more or less at the same time, Benjamin Franklin going back and forth between the U.S. and France, and so there was a huge affinity between the two. And so
they gave us the Statue of Liberty.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so much, but specifically, I was thinking about the incident of Charlie Hebdo that happened basically over the course of 10 years, or maybe less than 10 years, and then culminated in 2015 by the massacre, which, by the way, is going to be commemorated in a few weeks. That's going to be the 10th anniversary. This is a really big thing. And by the way, if I may put a plug here in about the relaunch for our translation of La Vie de Mahomet, that's the life of Muhammad, which was published by Charlie Hebdo. We have in the Arab Atheist magazine translated that and published it before. We had an issue before with hackers, and hopefully we're going to be launching it before the...
Make sure you send me the links over email, and
Definitely.
I'm going to put it inside the description.
So why am I bringing this up in this context? Because when the whole issue started taking place, first in Denmark in 2006, well, 2005, 2006, with the Muhammad cartoons, and then you had a lot of places following up by republishing some of this. You can see a big contrast between France, which supported unquestionably, without any kind of without really flinching from supporting the artist at Charlie Hebdo by publishing those cartoons. They tried to dissuade them from doing so. Right before, I forgot which one it was. It might have been in 2012 or 2000. It might have been that one right before La Vie de Muhammad. They tried to dissuade them. I'm talking about the political and social people over there. But eventually they supported them when they did do the publication. By contrast, if you come to the US, not a single US magazine or publication published these openly. So the reason why France was so incensed by this whole thing is that there is an infringement on the freedom of expression, freedom of press, and so this was a really big thing. It's not about the cartoons themselves. Now, this is an aside issue that's not really the main thing. It became, we have to support this because now it's an issue of principle.
So let me add one element here. There is a lot of horrible things going on in the U.S. with respect to media silencing stories, and it's basically, and it's the mass media, the media controlled by companies, not like Joe Rogan media. You know, we can talk about that, the kind of media now. And by the way, I didn't know about that. I didn't know any details. I didn't know the U.S. media wasn't publishing stuff about it. But right after that, I think it was the same event. Pamela Geller organized a Draw Muhammad cartoon contest in Texas. She picked Texas. I imagine you know why, but you'll know people will know in a second when I finish this story. They were, of course, look, it's clear to me they were testing things, you know, and it worked kind of, because they did this contest and somebody pulled out a gun and tried to shoot. I don't know what happened exactly, but a Texan, a gun owning Texan, shot him dead. This is like a normal thing in Texas. Everyone's got a gun in Texas. This is like it's part of the culture, which is why Pamela Geller picked Texas. I don't even know where she's from. Maybe she's from Texas. I don't know. And now here's the thing. Pamela Geller is just an individual person operating on her own. She's not part of a media company. You know, she is media, but kind of like Joe Rogan media herself.
Yeah.
So this, you know, it's damning against our corporations here in the U.S. And just like there's only like a few people that own it all in the U.S. All the main old media.
Right. I'm not saying this as a criticism necessarily.
I was.
Well, no, I see that there are other contexts in the U.S. that might have this framed differently. I believe the UK itself also had an issue republishing the cartoons, for example. But there are so many other places in Italy, in Germany, and I had a list of those who did actually redo the publication, but this is just one incident, but it was really an issue of standing by the principle and making sure that if there's a journalist who's not really hurting anybody physically by producing cartoons or writing,
it definitely doesn't.
Yeah, and so the perceived insult that happens in that case by people who are adherents of Islam or any other religion are if they want to impose their opinion on everybody else by saying no, you have to stop this, that would be an infringement on free speech.
One little thing about what you said. By the way, this was all supposed to be announcements. Let's do this real quick. So
Okay.
this episode is the third of, it's a three-parter, a third of what is the future of Islam. Again, to get context on this episode, please watch the first two. Please like, subscribe, and share. And just real quick, was that supposed to happen? Let's see. Okay, so do you have anything more to say about this, or do you want to continue some of what we talked about last time, which I have prepared?
I'm sure some of it is going to just come up during this.
Okay, so let me have one clarification I wanted to say. I actually had some experience with this thing you talked about, where in the US or any country that has a freedom of religion, you're going to have this issue where a father, let's say, is trying to do his religion. And let's say his religion says, I get to marry my daughter off at 12 years old. And that's happening in America. Well, if this goes to court and the judge decides to give the father the freedom of his religion, well, then there's a forced marriage about to happen. Now, I don't know if people get this, if it's very obvious, but that goes against the individual rights of that 12-year-old little girl.
Yeah.
And now that's the wrong way to go. The judge that does it correctly, and this happened by my own experience, this is the way he said it: I will respect religion. as much as I can until it crosses over into removing somebody's individual rights. Okay, so as an example of a thing, if a parent is hitting the child, and I want to be clear to everyone, in Illinois, the parent has the legal right to hit their child in some very specific context. Okay, like it has to be a corrective action. If the judge finds that, you know, even if your religion says you get to hit your kids, that doesn't matter to the judge. The judge cares about the laws in you know, yes, there might be a conflict like you described, freedom of religion and the individual rights of the child, but I think it's a very clear win. Individual rights, that's the way it's going to work. And it's come on, anytime a parent is going to be abusing a child, I think everyone knows, look, if it crosses over to abuse, we want to protect the child from the parent. We will remove the child from the parent.
Well,
that's how much the U.S. will do to protect the child.
Let me give a somewhat similar example from the U.S. and from, I think it's the U.K., but I'm not entirely sure. So I think before I mentioned the issue of female genital mutilation, which is something that does happen within Islam, but it's also something that seems to have been an African custom that is independent of religion, which
that
is
spread into the Arab world too.
No, it seems to have been something that was common in the general area. It's not something that I wouldn't necessarily say it originated in Africa, but because it seems to have been something.
Well, if you look at the numbers now, how much it's done, it's the biggest numbers are in Africa, deeper in Africa.
Right. Yeah.
It is in Egypt a little bit.
Yes.
But less so than in the rest of Africa.
Yeah, but what I'm talking about here is not looking at the current statistics, but looking at it as a phenomenon that is there. It could have been something that originated in Africa. It originated from somewhere else.
People could have been aliens who brought it to us. There's so many infinite options.
Or maybe different groups of people independently came up with it. Whatever the reason or the origin is, it's something that has been instated within Islamic practices by actual texts, by actual quotes from that come or that can be traced to Muhammad. Whether he said it or not, that's irrelevant. What we know is that there are Muslims who followed these sayings and actually performed the acts on certain girls based on the fact that they think this is going to be increasing piety, increasing hygiene, whatever the reason is. And so this is something that has happened in certain European countries, and it reached the news. I'm not sure actually if it was the UK or the Netherlands, but it seems that it was treated at some point as a kind of a cultural thing that's happening within that community, that's okay, we're not really going to treat it as abuse as such.
To be clear for everyone, this is also the case for male genital.
That's what I was going to say. So when it comes to Muslims and Jews, they do the circumcision almost right after the baby male is born. And
so we're disagreeing with the U.S. government who lets parents do this to their children.
Yeah,
I'm disagreeing with it.
So
we haven't come along. We haven't come to the level of, well, no one's actually. There's no activists in the U.S. or lawyers arguing on behalf of babies. Hey, don't cut off their. No one's doing that. That would be the reason why it's still there. No, you know what I mean? It goes against our laws here in principle, but no one's going to change it, until someone actually puts in the effort.
Right. Yeah. So by contrast, in the Arab world, there is a professor right now he's in Switzerland, but he's originally from the Palestinian territories. His name is Sami Deeb, and he has been very vocal about male circumcision and the issues that it brings, and the fact that it is a form of abuse to the child, and so on. So there is activism, and I'm sure that if you look at some places, you would find some people opposing the idea that, okay, if you want the child to at some point undergo that procedure, it's going to be up to them to make that decision. It's their body, and so on. When they're babies, they're not going to have the consent, and so you shouldn't be doing that to them, etc. So the line of argument is very clear. It's something that you should have control over as an individual. And so I was bringing this up as a way that sometimes Western societies, where it is the fact that there are laws, there are some exceptions that are given to some of the communities in order to practice what is considered to be a cultural.
Grandfathered exceptions. It's grandfathered by 3,000 years.
Well, I
you know what you mean?
Yeah, true. But here's the thing. In the UK, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they have they admit the jurisprudence of Islamic courts, so that it's possible to have two parallel legal systems where you could actually have someone going to get married, get a inheritance, stuff of that sort, through these courts, which are run by Muslims, which is at some point is going to conflict with the law of the land.
I think we have that in the U.S.
I am not entirely sure about the U.S. I'm talking about the UK.
This sounds like it would go against our basic laws.
Yeah, so that's another example of what I was saying.
All right, so we got some people talking. I'm gonna put up some of these real quick. RBG, Black American from Denver, Colorado. I'm putting this up because he also said he used to be a Muslim, and he was a Muslim for 10 years, and he didn't know about the child marriage till recently.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we should also clarify something about child marriage. So most of the Muslim countries don't have the practice as something that's as common as people might think. There are places. Yemen might be one of them. I would have to probably look it up, but I think there are certain places that have a certain legal age that goes well below the typical legal age. But at the same time, if you look at certain U.S. states, you might also find some really low ages that don't conform to the typical norms. I'm not sure which states there are, but I think. I
know what you mean. Some of them are pretty young. I think 16, or do you mean younger than that even?
I don't want to throw in a number that's wrong, but I feel that I've
14.
It might have been, yeah.
Okay. I would like to go through some notes from last time. We got some comments to address some of the stuff we talked about. Let's see if I can figure it out. Here we go. Okay, let me make this bigger. Can't see. This was in answering the question, what's it going to take to change what's going on with respect to Islam? And this person says, I don't know what will work. The efficient way seems to get you canceled by the left or banned on Reddit. And what they mean by the efficient way is just open criticism.
It's very problematic in the US right now when it comes to interpreting what constitutes criticism and what constitutes an attack on the identity of the person, and so on. So a while back, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, um, the Arab atheist community on Facebook, uh, along with other groups, we met with representatives from Facebook who were trying to explain certain restrictions, and those restrictions essentially, for us, boiled down to equating the religion of a person with their identity as something that should not be criticized. Um, and since then, we've been having a lot of issues on Facebook. So many different things that shouldn't be interpreted as an attack on the person have become considered as such. And so this idea of the cancel culture that unfortunately went way too far into implementing these ideas and reinterpreting them is really harming the ability of people to just talk. Very often, there is absolutely no intention of attacking a person or attacking their group, and yet this gets interpreted as such.
So this is why one of the things that this organization needs to work on is, all the social media companies need to be getting rid of this whole censorship or cancel culture activities. That's why I brought this up.
See, I do understand their need for moderation, for having someone moderate discussions. That's something that's out of the question to be removed. It's just what actually goes under the fold of having this moderated, especially when it comes to directions that come from a company that is run in the U.S. by people within a U.S. culture, implementing it all over the world, for example.
I'll tell you, this crosses over into something I've been working on for a while now. Sometimes when in a case like this, somebody's trolling instead of actually trying to seek the truth, okay? And when somebody's trolling, and it could be them on their own, or it could be part of a massive thing like Russia's doing, okay? It's just, so the difference between somebody honestly trying to ask a question to learn versus asking a question it's a rhetorical question just to spread hate, okay?
Yeah.
That would be trolling. Now, here's the thing. It's hard to tell the difference between the two. Sometimes you're wrong. You thought it was trolling. You find out it's not later. Other times, usually it's the reverse. A lot of people just don't even know what trolling is, and they just kind of at face value look at everything as, oh, this person was trying to be honest, without thinking there's more than half the messages on the internet is probably somebody trolling. And I do think we need to get rid of the trolls and trolling messages, which I work on very hard. Okay? But that's me as a non-moderator in a venue, a discussion platform. And I'm not kicking people out. I'm just talking to them in a way that makes them want to stop trolling. And then now, if I was the moderator of a discussion place, which I am now, my own Discord, and somebody did come to troll me, and I recognize it as trolling really quick, but I gave them extra chances to have the opportunity to convince me otherwise, and they failed. And then I banned him and 4 other people just like that. And then other people looked at that. One person looked at it and said, I was very confused. I didn't understand what was going on. And I was like, well, they were just trolling me. That's it. They were not there to do any truth seeking. It was not real stuff they were saying. It was all complete nonsense. Yeah. So I'm agreeing with you there that there needs to be like some level of moderation and just on a basic level. Like if we want to have a discussion place where we're going to have serious discussions, you don't want porn showing up there. I mean, unless you were discussing something about the porn, but still, you get what I mean? Like porn just showing up is like trolling.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing that to have a discussion. It's not a place for it.
It can be far less conspicuous than porn. It could be something that is really off topic, completely going in a direction that veers off from where you want to discuss this, and all of a sudden the whole discussion is hijacked into that direction and people are just saying nonsense.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's just good faith, badly organized. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes.
And I don't think those should be treated the same way as trolling, but definitely, if somebody's talking about something totally off topic, let's say it's a group about, I don't know, having kids, and then somebody wants to talk about suicide or something, not related. Don't bring that here, unless it is related, where the mother is
right. That's the thing. If you want to do realistic moderation, you have to actually look at the context. You have to look at what is being said and why. And sometimes some people have an angle, but that angle doesn't actually show until you really get into what's being discussed, and you could have some back and forth with them until you figure out what's going on. So it is possible to first give people a chance to do whatever they want, and then start exploring a little bit more to make a judgment call.
And it's happened to me before, where I'll bring up a topic and it'll get deleted by moderation. Hey, this is off topic. But they'll also say an extra little bit and say, I can see the angle you were trying to connect. And they give me some advice to connect it better.
Yeah.
And then I post it again and they let it in.
Yeah.
That's good moderation.
Yeah. The problem that I think is brought up by this comment is that very often things are being dismissed wholesale, either because you have...
If it just has a word.
Yeah, a single word, a single keyword that might be triggering...
The computer's doing it.
Yeah, very often, but sometimes it's actually not also the computer. Sometimes it's the people themselves who have been instructed to look for specific things, and so it's really unfortunate that we're at a point where something of that is happening as the norm rather than as an exception.
All right, let's move on to this next one. This was in response to when we were talking about, the statistics of Muslims in the world. And this person's from Bangladesh, I think, and they said the way they count Muslims there, or whatever your religion is the entire house is counted by the owner of the house. Yeah. So if the owner is a Muslim and there's 10 people in the house, 10 goes to Muslims.
Yeah.
That's a very efficient way to collect your data, but it's not very accurate, is the point here.
It doesn't matter. It's ideologically driven. If you're a Muslim, then it's your responsibility to make sure that those in your household are also Muslims. Otherwise,
and here's the thing: that person who wrote Muslim in Bangladesh maybe could be an ex-Muslim or an atheist, and they don't want their head chopped off. So the entire house got counted as 10 Muslims when it was 10 atheists.
And let me maybe bring up the issue with Bangladesh. Bangladesh has had a really bad history with bloggers being killed because they so much as hint at a criticism of Islam. So the atmosphere over there is really against people.
It's worse than anywhere else almost, right? I mean, is Pakistan as bad?
I'm specifically thinking about the bloggers, because in Bangladesh they had lists of people that are targeted, people who just write simple stuff on the internet, they get targeted.
And here's the thing: if you were an ex-Muslim and you saw 3 of your bloggers get deleted from the internet, and you know why, you will probably write Muslim on the consensus.
Yeah.
All right. This was related to in our last episode, I had asked, we posed the question, can Islam reform by making a similar move that I understood happened in Christianity, where the idea was, hey, let's remove the middleman, let's think for ourselves. And I posed that question, and I just posted our live stream, and someone replied that they think that happened. That's what the Baha'i faith is. I only recently learned about this Baha'i faith. I actually had someone who found Uniting the Cults wants to help and wants me to help their project. He was in the Baha'i faith, and we did an episode. Anyway, he said a little bit here, and I thought, to try to get him to say more. So I'm going to read this real quick. It has its origins in Persia in the 1800s. The history is comprehensively recorded and its scripture meticulously preserved and translated. However, it has definitely evolved as an independent religion with its own distinct character and institutions. It fully respects the place and role of Islam as it does all of the great historic religions of I'm not following that grammar there. The core vision is one God, one reality, and one human race. It utterly eschews violence and coercion of any kind. Is eschews the right word there? I think he's trying to say we don't want violence and don't want coercion of any kind.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, then I don't know the word eschews. And demands we respect. Go ahead.
No, get rid of, throw away, reject.
Okay. Then I don't know that word. And demands we respect the right of all seekers to their independent search for truth. There's so much more to say, but I offer this concise claim to address your question. And I guess that blue thing is a link. I didn't go read it. There's also r/Baha'i, where there are others who can offer diverse and informed answers to specific questions. The other gentleman I spoke to about the Baha'i faith, we were talking about it for like an hour and a half. He never mentioned that there's any violence, but there's a lot of irrationality and a lot of nonsense,
Well,
it's very mystical, but non-violent up there.
Yeah, I would object to the idea that the Baha'i is actually that answer that people are looking for, especially if you're considering it as originating from Islam. Now, it did originate from Islam. There was, before Baha'i faith, there was Babism, which is also, I think it's the precursor of the Baha'is. They were very heavily persecuted by the Persians at the time because it was considered a kind of a heresy, which it is.
Hold on. Persia at the time the state was Islamic?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
I
didn't know which time. Yeah. So that means we're talking 1800s right here.
Yeah. So it is Islamic, but probably not Islamic in the sense that people would think of Islam, especially in Iran today. It's a completely different thing. And so if when people think about analogs between the history of Islam and Christianity, and they want to point to a specific phase where some kind of a reform took place, they actually point to something that people today would not look positively at, which is the movement of Abdul Wahhab, which happened in what is now Saudi Arabia in the 17th and 18th century, which basically resulted in the ideology of Wahhabism that essentially is a return to the more fundamental, basic version
The
of Islam.
original.
Yeah,
That's what he's saying.
that removes all the fluff that was accumulated afterwards. And so when people say don't consider it, it's not something that I'm saying, but if you look this up, you will see that don't ask Muslims to do the Reformation because they have already undergone that type of movement. And what you have right now in the form of Wahhabism is that. Now, that's not saying that the situation is hopeless, that there is no such thing as a possibility of reform. It's just that I don't think that either the Wahhabism, which from a historical point of view has some analogs with what happened in Christianity, or Baha'ism, which is actually a very small minority, and in fact their main shrine right now, if you want to look at it from the point of view of Muslims, their main shrine is within Israeli territories, and so it's considered to be something that has an association with Israel, with the Jewish state, and so on. So it's really not being viewed that way. Uh, I think that it's worthy of looking at it as a kind of a religion that tries to revise certain things in Islam, or any kind of ancient religion that exists in a certain way that people try to revise it, create some kind of a fusion. I don't know a lot of the particulars of this, but I believe it actually mixes a lot of elements that come from Christianity, from Buddhism, and from Islam, and so there's a lot of things that that could, in principle, be considered positive here.
Harry Flashman says, "Greetings, ex-convert here from the UK." So, by the way, you know what's weird for me is when Protestantism started, and also when Jesus started, like in the Jesus case, I don't think he was saying, "Hey, I'm bringing a new religion." I think he was just saying, "Hey, the stuff you guys are doing is stupid. You should do this instead."
He was actually working within Judaism, and I would also claim that Muhammad was also presenting the same exact thing at the very beginning. He wasn't presenting a new religion.
Okay, let's get back to the Muhammad one in a moment.
Okay.
But in the Jesus case, you know, I don't think he was claiming to bring a new religion. He's just in the same religion and correcting all the people doing dumb shit within the religion. And then afterwards, they, you know, built a religion around him. And then they separated it from the original one.
Yeah, but the separation happened for a very important reason, which is the idea of the covenant. So that's why you have a New Testament and an Old Testament. So that after Jesus, which is not something, if I understand correctly, is not something that was initiated by Jesus himself, that kind of separation. On the contrary.
Well, my guess is the people who initiated the separation were the people who were already Jews and didn't like what Jesus was saying.
That's part of it, but that's not the only part. There's also something that was initiated by the Christians themselves, especially when you had at the very beginning in the early history of Christianity, you had those Jewish revolts against the Roman Empire, and then all of a sudden the Roman Empire adopted Christianity in the 3rd, 4th century, and it ended up having this kind of animosity against the Jews, who were then blamed for crucifying Jesus. So there were things happening on both sides.
So now the Protestantism case, if we're in Catholicism and then somebody says, "Hey, I think it would be better if we throw out the middleman and everyone think for themselves," couldn't that have been done without somebody saying, "Hey, I'm making a new religion"? It could. And maybe it was. Maybe that's what Martin Luther was doing.
Well, a religion is first and foremost a kind of it's based on community, even though it might be presented in the form of an idea. If there is no community, there
And a
is no
leader too,
religion.
then, right?
Yeah,
Name a religion that didn't have a leader.
Yeah, I mean the leader is important, but I'm talking about eventually if you want to look at it as a religion that has separated from the original fold where it was viewed as a heresy and then got converted into a religion, it has to have a community to support that. Without a community, there's no such thing as a religion.
Yeah, I get what you mean. You're saying, like, if I made a religion today, in the sense that I wrote a book and called it a religion, if it didn't get any followers, it's not really a religion. That's what you're saying.
Did you a couple of years ago there was the prophet Nash'at? Did you hear of him? So there is a host of would-be prophets that have been appearing in the Arab world. This guy appeared in Lebanon, and he had a lot of people who started following him. He started producing some kind of a scripture, and
So that's a full-fledged religion then. If they have some
yeah,
followers.
He had Facebook groups and so on. I joined one of them.
Were you a follower?
Well, we were making fun of the whole thing at the time, but at the end, I believe right now he's in jail in Lebanon.
Okay.
But why is he in jail? Because eventually, if he's able to actually attract followers, he is able to produce a religion. That's very similar to what happened to Baha'ism with Baha'u'llah and Al-Bab before him.
Okay, so I have no more comments here, but we do have topics from before. I don't know what you want to get into next. Do you want to talk about two kinds of jihad? Do you want to talk about Islam encroaching Western places and the Huntington class of civilizations? Or closed society versus open society? Or Islam subsiding with the stats? Okay. Or I have a new thing I want to talk about. Maybe we should wait until we dedicate an entire episode for this.
Right.
I want to talk about some of the things that would make an effect in the future. You know, we're talking about what's the future of Islam? What can we do to change things? One way to unindoctrinate people, and I want to say two things about the unindoctrinate. It'll help people get out of Islam, but also you could stay in Islam, but it'll protect you a little bit by bringing in some comedy. Okay? So for people that not into comedy much, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But for people that are really into comedy, you know, a comedian can take an idea that would otherwise be very offensive to people and say it in a way that nobody finds offensive. A comedian can do that. And there's ex-Muslim comedians and there's Muslim comedians. And I've been listening to some of them. Some of them are fucking funny as hell.
As long as they don't bring up taboos in a very direct way as an affront to their audience, I think that would work. But the problem with comedy is that many of the issues that we had is something that has to do, especially with drawings, but enacting things would probably be also an extension to this. So avoiding this being an affront, a direct affront.
You mean cancel culture?
Yeah, not cancel culture. I'm specifically talking about the way that this is going to be perceived by a Muslim audience.
Harry says, this is a great topic. I've been trying to broker conversations on this topic between converts and practicing born Muslims, also cultural non-practicing Muslims, about the future of Islam. Yeah, so about the comedy thing, you know, as an example, okay, there's things that pretty much affects the whole world. Maybe there's parts of the world that isn't affected by this, but at least in the West, like suicide. In the West, like nobody wants to talk about it in general. Okay, the general thing is don't talk about it. And then the people that actually do face it, who's let's say attempted it, when they're talking with other people who also attempted it and they're in therapy and stuff, they are talking about it. But everybody else should be talking about it. It's stupid that we're not. And people get offended when you do talk about it. That's part of why we're not talking about it. People get offended. Oh, I can't believe you're talking about that. And then a guy, and I'm sure multiple people have made fun of the concept of suicide. Actually, I remember Jerry Seinfeld did. Maybe it was kind of mean the way he did it. Because what he said was, do you ever notice how, people commit suicide and then they don't achieve it, whatever? And then he goes, wouldn't that suck? You just found out there's another thing you suck at. That seems kind of mean. But anyway, everyone in his audience laughed. And then another guy, Louis C.K., he did a much longer bit about suicide. And, I'm guessing there was people in the audience who it's a sensitive topic for them. Either they were in a case where they were thinking about suicide or a loved one committed suicide. And, the way he talks about it, everyone's laughing. It's something about they put you in an environment in your brain. The environment's in your brain, to be clear. They put you in an environment that none of your triggers that would trigger you to get offended or have an anxiety attack, they don't happen because you're not in the environment that have those triggers. And I think it's just related to, part of it is, look, when you go to a comedy show, you're already in
Yes, that's
an
what
environment of I'm ready to have fun.
Yeah.
And you're looking for jokes already.
And you, especially if you know who you're going to be seeing, what they're going to be saying, and so on. So you're already in the mindset of wanting to laugh at that specific idea that they're going to say.
And you already have, I'm sure, some people who are in the culture of comedy. You almost, at least for me, I don't. How do I say this? I know their job is hard, so they're trying to not offend. But if they fail to offend, you shouldn't be mad at them because look, they're human. You know what I mean? Like I have that in my head. So that's part of what's, part of the environment I'm in. So those, I already don't have a lot of triggers. Like,
let me push back on the idea by, I think it was Bill Maher who said that it's now very hard to make jokes in general because of the general environment of how this gets perceived.
And Bill Burr contradicted him on that episode where he said, "Go ahead."
I forgot the context right now. It's just that it stuck in my mind.
Yeah,
but what I'm saying is that we should be able to have some kind of comedy for depicting or talking about any kind of topic. There shouldn't be a restriction on that. But the unfortunate situation that we're in right now is that this is actually no longer as easy as it used to be. Now, I'm not saying that you should make fun of someone because of the way that they look, that they walk, that might hurt them, especially if there is some suffering that's involved in this. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there are genuinely funny ways of looking at things that might be adverse, and it would be a better take on these things, stripping away some layers of seriousness that might have otherwise just impeded you from seeing things in a brighter way.
So I want to tell everyone, we're going to do an episode just on this, either broadly, how do we help people unindoctrinate, or just kind of narrowly using comedy for that. I think that's what we'll do. And we'll have a lot of actual comedy to show. Not mine and not yours. Maybe yours. I don't know. Maybe
I'm not a comedian.
But I meant videos. I meant YouTube videos. Of people actually doing really good comedy. I already have some ready, by the way. Okay, so oh shit, we're already in an hour. That's fine. Do you want to, whatever topic we open up right now, we're probably going to devote 10 minutes to it at least. Is there any of the topics I mentioned you want to get into right now?
Well, I was going to talk about the statistics, about numbers, and about the two types of jihad, but I'm not sure if this is
Too big?
Yeah, I mean, we can start by just I can go through a couple of slides, but it's probably because it
too
has
big.
numbers and statistics, it's probably going to be something that needs to wait.
We'll leave it for, I guess, okay, so next time is part 4. Okay, part 4 of What's the Future of Islam. We are definitely going to talk about Islam subsiding, I guess, the stats, okay?
Yeah.
And I guess that could run into all the other stuff, closed society versus open society.
Well, let's make it a little bit more realistic. It's not that it's subsiding, but viewing it as something that's going to engulf everything is not realistic.
Right. That's how we were trying to present it. Yes. X number of Muslims is not the same as another set of X number of Muslims.
Yes.
Yeah. They're not the same. Stop treating Muslims as atoms, or humans in general as atoms. Okay, let's see. Should we cut this off closer to the actual time, or you have anything else to say, or anyone listening? Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, probably. If you have someone specific with comments that
I can go through some of the comments and see. There was a lot of comments, but it looked like people talking to each other. So this person said, Andy, in Morocco, he's saying the entire population is counted as Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
Really? They don't have any ex-Muslims in Morocco.
In most countries, you're not able to. So here's the thing: in most Muslim countries, you are obliged to put the religion in the ID card or the passport, and you end up having to put something that might not necessarily coincide with your identity. In places where they deny that there's even any Christians, like, for example, this person's talking about Morocco, that's really a big thing over there because Christianity is not supposed to be a thing. There is a very famous Moroccan presenter who has now become a Christian. He's been active for, I would say, probably 15 years. His name is Rashid. And he does proselytize, but he's pretty much focusing on his ex-Muslim identity, criticizing Islam. So yes, I definitely understand the significance of this comment, and it does resonate.
RBG from before said, I think Noble Drew Ali is the first Black American Muslim. And then I didn't know what that meant, but then he clarified with this. W.D. Fard Muhammad taught Black Americans Islam in Detroit, 1930. I think he's referring to the Nation of Islam.
If I'm not mistaken, there is someone from the 18th century who was an ex-slave or was a current slave at the time. The reason why it came to mind, because I think I've seen that mentioned in Islamic literature in Arabic, where they say you had this person, and they mention several people, especially in connection with America. So, for example, people on the ships with Christopher Columbus, many of the navigators are supposed to have been Muslims in the first place. He got them from regions in Spain and so on. So, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure about the date of that person, but I think it was in the 19th century.
I don't know what this is about. Metsis says, how much are you getting paid by the missionaries?
We're being paid by the Great Mason Lodge, not the missionaries. That's how they usually frame it.
So, by the way, if there's anyone who wants to send me money,
by all
like
means,
this, a grant, whatever, I'm accepting offers.
Yeah,
it can be secret, it can be public. I don't care.
This has followed us for so long. In on Facebook communities, they start floating things. Where are the thousands of dollars that you're being paid every month? Whether it's from the Crusaders, that's how they refer to Christians usually, or the Zionists, or the whatever.
I don't know what this is referencing. Is this related to something you said earlier? Is he saying he's in prison talking to us? I don't know. I can't tell.
No, but they're referring to a prisoner. I'm not entirely sure. It might have been one of.
I don't know. Maybe he's talking about another prophet. Yeah.
No, I would not discount it. Yeah, but it's possible to put people in prison in Morocco for this.
Is that Yusuf Israel says most likely Islam will be reformed like Christianity and then disappear like Christianity. Would you say Christianity has disappeared?
I would probably say it has morphed into something other than what it was. So you might say,
and everything's morphing, but
yeah, but Christianity is still growing. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, that was actually one of the numbers I wanted to show. It's actually growing.
Well, at some time in history, Christianity as an entity, however you want to describe whatever that entity is, governments were using it to mind control people, and then so that they can use them to send people for war to other places.
Yeah.
I don't know too much if that's happening to. I mean, it's Pope doesn't control any countries today, like
right.
He used to.
And there is a reason, and I mentioned something like that, I think, last time. Why is it so possible to make that separation between the authority of the Pope, who used to actually have a say in politics, who used to essentially rule out of church?
So it's another way of saying it's not that they changed much. It's that the rest of us changed how we let them operate. You know, we don't let them control our government anymore.
Well, no, I think there's something more fundamental, more fundamental about the difference between Islam and Christianity when it comes to that. So Islam has a built-in system for governance within the religion itself. It's an integral part of the religion. Whereas in the case of Christianity, the whole idea of having a pope leads the community and basically have a say in things, this is something that can be separated from the religion proper and still have no problem. Because if you want to look at the comparable part of Christianity that looks like Islam, it's actually the Old Testament, which represents Judaism, and that's completely separate. It's an Old Testament.
Yusuf says again, it is disappearing, Islam. Your religion is contradictive and illogical. You cannot be reasoned with. I don't know who he means. I don't know if he thinks we're Muslims or something. I don't know. I don't know. Not even sure why they said this. I decided to put it. Maybe I shouldn't have. I don't know. Okay.
No, it's possible that people were thinking that. Anyway, yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess if we're calling the show Deconstructing Islam and they're going to think we're Muslims. Really? Maybe. I don't know. Whatever. Andy says, in Jordan, 2024, millions of Christians suffer high persecution. Okay, maybe not millions, because right here he's saying about 5,000 Christians were killed for their faith. 15,000 churches attacked.
I highly doubt that this is.
Those are big numbers,
especially in Jordan. In Jordan, in particular, has maybe something like 10% of the population or less Christian, and
that's big.
It is still big, but it's
wow.
If you look at the whole,
we're talking like 1.5 million people.
Yeah, it's and there is no historical persecution, not in recent times. So I'm not sure what's being
Huh.
said here.
Yeah, by the way, everyone who's listening, Osam has got a connection to Jordan. Like
Yeah,
you got family in Jordan. So
yeah, I was born and raised there.
yeah. Yusuf says Christianity and Islam have the Hebrew origins in common, and therefore they can't stand having Jews in existence. The thing is, that's seeing Christians and Muslims as atoms. I didn't even know that much about, like, you probably got more of it than me, being from Jordan, but I still got some negative stereotype in my head about Jews from my parents.
Yeah,
and I'm sure I got some from America in general, which is a little bit different style of anti-Semitism, though.
right. No, I think there is some anti-Semitism that's built into Islam, especially in the second part of Muhammad's preaching when he went to Medina, and he had some dealings with the Jews that ended up with some massacres, with some expulsion. So there was something that got built into the religion based on that. At the beginning, that was actually not the case at all. At the beginning, I think he considered himself to be in the same line as other Jewish prophets. In fact, there is a very famous story of him and his wife going to his one of his in-laws or one of the relatives of his wife, which seems to have been a Christian. And when he told him about what he was saying, he was telling him, you seem to have been receiving the same message that came to Moses. And he used a Greek word, namus, which is actually what Christians use.
I wonder if the anti-Semitism outside of Christianity and Islam, I wonder what I would like to compare how bad the average individual hates Jews if they weren't in the Christian world and weren't in the Islamic world versus the Christian world version and the Islamic world version. Those three versions. I don't know too much about the anti-Semitism like from Russia, for example.
Well, why do you consider Russia to be outside the Christian realm? It's very orthodox.
There's a lot of Christianity there, but also, I mean, I guess that's just very old, and I guess the oldness of it is why it would be there, right? Centuries of Christians being there would have an effect of, whatever Christianness. So who else is left where you would be able to look for anti-Semitism that's not infected by Christianity or Islam?
If you go to Southeast Asia, places that Japan, China.
Actually, I recently saw a video of a woman who was documenting. It was a little bit documentary of Jews in Japan, and Japanese love the Jews there. And here's the thing: there's no Christian anti-Semitism in that area because there's no Christians.
The comment here actually does echo something that I mentioned last time, which is this joint origin. Actually, the fact that you have a lot of similarity between all three religions means that they're basically fighting over the same thing, and that's why they're able to see those similarities and create antagonisms based on that fight over the same legitimacy, because basically they're looking at the same inheritance.
And there would have been more than these three, but they kind of got erased, like Zoroastrianism. Mm-hmm. Are there any today that claim to be Zoroastrian?
Yeah, there are some mainly in India, some in Persia.
So I wonder how come that one doesn't get mentioned along with the Abrahamic religions. I guess because it's older than Abraham.
It doesn't have the same kind of origin. It doesn't have prophets. It talks about the theology is very different because you have you have a good God and a bad God. This is something that's very different in the Abrahamic religion, where you have just a single God, and he's the one that's responsible for everything. So it's one of the sources for Islam in particular, but I wouldn't say that it's an Abrahamic religion.
Okay, so that would explain why there would be less conflict there. I get what you mean. These three religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, see themselves. In football, there's in American football, there's there's a team two teams gonna end up in the Super Bowl, but you also have these little rivalries within your own division. I don't even know the names. Like for example, Chicago Bears and who's their big rivals?
Don't ask me.
The Green Bay Packers, because they're in the same division. They play against each other more often than other two teams do. So similarly, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are in competition more with each other because they have more competing claims, more conflicts of competing claims than, for example, any of these three religions and Zoroastrianism, or any of these three religions and Buddhism, which doesn't even claim a god.
Yeah, and it connects also with the fact that these were communities, and these were, as such, they're not just ideas. They were communities that ended up fighting with each other over centuries. And not so much Judaism or Jews against Muslims or Christians, but mainly Muslims and Christians. There was a lot of fighting during the preceding centuries.
Somebody said, Scaring C says Zoroastrianism isn't Abrahamic. Abraham's not involved. Yes, I know that. The reason I raised the issue is, and I don't know, I'm not an expert, I don't know too much about this. Zoroastrianism is older than the other three, and it is monotheistic. And I don't know another one in Mesopotamia or anywhere that is monotheistic and as old as or near the age of Zoroastrianism.
There is, I think, there was a prophet called Mani, and his connected religion was Manichaeism or something of that sort, that tried to create a fusion at some point that included Zoroastrianism and some other things, might have been Christianity, and he was promoting a kind of a monotheistic thing. So
Scaring C is saying there is a God in Buddhism, but not in the sense of Abraham.
Yes. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought there wasn't a God there. I never heard of it. I mean, I didn't study it either. But
Buddhism, as something that's connected to Hinduism to begin with, has a lot of entities. But
okay, so multiple gods. So there isn't one God.
It's not gods as such.
Deities?
Yeah, so it's separate from the way that, for example, you would approach a certain god in Hinduism. Very often, Buddhism is considered to be a kind of an atheist religion, even though it does have all these entities, but it's not. It cannot be put in the same category as Abrahamic religions, or even to some extent Hinduism, which is most related to it.
You know what's weird is this theological point I just thought of. I guess the concept of multiple gods is older than the concept of only one God.
Yes. Yeah.
And I thought that it's a logical move to go from multiple gods to one God, because look, how could the gods be, if they have a different opinion with each other, how does that get resolved? That makes no sense to me. There has to be one God.
Yeah, I don't think the main thing was a conceptual merger that required them only. That's one factor, but the main factor for monotheism is concentrating the authority, the secular authority.
And that's the point. Where it goes negative is, and I heard this from Ellie Schragenheim. I should have known this from before. It sounds extremely basic. If you have a concept of God, and two people have a concept of God and they're different gods, and your concept of God says, look, it's infallible, and then it's only a little bit further to say, oh, that means I got an infallible source of information, and now let me chop your head off because I know it's the truth.
Yes.
You know, a similar thing happens with parents. They don't say it in this way. They don't say I'm infallible, but they say things like this. Well, I'm likely to know more than you about this topic.
Yeah.
I'm 40. You're born yesterday, or you're a year old. I'm likely to know more than you. Therefore, I'm going to use force.
There is a reason why the personality of God is something that overlaps pretty much with the ancestors, with the idea of a parent. And so very often in religious discourse, you will see that the God is presented as a father.
So let me go ahead and explain why this is wrong, the parenting context one. Just because you might know more than me in a topic doesn't mean you will be right in a particular disagreement. I could be the one who's right. And actually, there's separate issues too. Even if you are right, and I'm the one who's wrong, that's not a reason to use force. You could just let me be, let me learn from my mistakes. And actually, by using force and preventing me from letting me learn from my mistakes, I do not learn. You're preventing me from learning.
Yeah.
And in the context of a baby, you know, what do people think of as what a child's life is supposed to be for the first 20 years of their life? It's learning shit so that you can then know things and function in the world. And the way parents operate, the kind of parents that I'm talking about with this logic of use force because I know more, the way they're operating is, in effect, control the child's life, make all their decisions for them so they can't make mistakes, thereby protecting them, right? But then you do that for 20 years and you've learned nothing and you don't know how to operate without your parents.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's see. So it looks like in the comments they're talking to each other. There's some Hebrew talking. I can't read Hebrew. Let's see here. I found one. Monotheism begins with Adam and the God who speaks to him. I don't think so. Zoroastrianism is older, and I don't think it had Adam in there. Maybe it did. I don't know. It could have.
I mean, monotheism does have a source that comes from Zoroastrianism. I wouldn't really. The original source or who started this horrible idea of monotheism. I don't think is something to compete and be proud of.
Sarah says, and then we were talking about, you know, I have an infallible source. I think that's what she's referring to here. If you believe in God, you think you might reach the level of I have an infallible source of information, and then they rely on religion to make decisions because they don't know how. Oh, she was talking about the parenting scenario. Yes, but to be clear, a lot of atheist parents do this.
Yeah.
All right, you want to end here? This is our longest one so far.
I'm trying to see here if there's something in the comments. Do you see something that's
Oh, you know, I didn't know that you could see the comments in StreamYard. I didn't know you could do that.
Well, on the right-hand side, there's...
Yeah, I didn't know you could see them. I thought it was just me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that can be said here.
Harry's responding to Yusuf. Islam says something similar. Noah's story teaches idol worshippers that human morality affects us, not a variety or arguing idols.
Noah's story is bad, period. It has so many bad things and bad things to tell about this idea of the God who initiated this. So I don't know.
You know, I feel bad now because they're arguing with each other, and I showed one of them. I feel like I have to show the other two now Otherwise, I'll look biased. So Yusuf says there's no mentioning of idol worship and the conversations with Noah. And the Hebrew tradition started almost 6,000 years ago. I don't know. Anyway, okay, you want to stop here then?
I guess.
Or you okay? So we'll stop here, everyone. See you next time. Next time is part 4. What is the future of Islam? We'll be talking about. Well, we already talked about it a little bit. Some actual stats, some numbers, and a few other things. So see you guys next time, and Usama, we'll talk for a couple more minutes. Okay.
Well, let me say something to Yosef Israel if he speaks Hebrew. בפעם הבאה, אם אתה רוצה לדבר עברית ויש לך דבר מהתנ"ך שמדבר על הסיפורים האלה, אנחנו יכולים לדבר עליו.
All right. I mean, you could have been cussing at me just now. I don't really know.
Maybe
you were. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.